The day is January 17th, 2016. I have the pleasure of interviewing the World War II veteran Francis Riebe, also known as Flick. He served with the 363rd Infantry Regiment in World War II, part of the 91st Division. And we're here to talk to him about his service, but also his life. So if you would begin maybe where you were born, when you were born, and what you did as a kid.
Well, I go back a long time, 1922, and February the 28th. And I was born in Hog Heaven. Now, most people think that's a figment of somebody's imagination, but there is a little place in Montana that's called Hog Heaven. If you're familiar with western Montana, Flathead Lake, most other people know Flathead Lake. On the west shore of it is Lake Mary Rodan to the west. And on the west side of that is a range of mountains. It's called the Hog Heaven Range. It's on the map. And on the other side is a ranch country over there that quite a bunch of cattle was raised there back in the 30s and that time. Now it's pretty well desiccated. There's nobody around it. Very few people anymore. But it was a great life. Depression, we were poor people, but we didn't know it. We were rich because we had a good family. And I got to get this little kick in. I'm the richest person in the country. With the family I've got on both sides, my wife and mine, it's just unreal how well they get along with each other. That's the thing that makes it nice. They all think I'm kind of nice. I don't know what I did. Mistake somewhere, I guess. Maybe I said no at the right time and that helped things out. I don't know. But anyway, I was a cowboy first 19 years of my life, and then I went to driving truck. And interesting thing, I'd hauled oil into Missoula, Montana from Kalispell to help build the airport out here. That was in the early 40s. And then from there I run a business here in Missoula. I was 19 years old. I was district manager for U.S. Petroleum Corporation on a big title. Not much pay, but important job as it turned out. But I was drafted from there. I was asked Uncle Sam to join his budding brigade, as we said, and I went into the infantry. But very fortunate, the 91st Infantry Division was just being reactivated, and I had a chance to go in. And of course, then, if you pay attention to it, my grandpa always told me that if you had to do something, do the best you could. And I tried to do that in the Army. I just did everything. And, we started out at $30 a month for buck private. And then we got private first class. After we were fired for a record, we had to record our shooting ability. And, of course, coming from Montana, where you were raised with a gun in the house because you needed it. I learned to shoot when I was really young. And I had no expert, is no problem for me. I could pick up anything and outshoot my competition, which was a kind of fun. But after that, then I got to be private first class. And I was married at the time. I got married just before I went in. And my wife had come out to camp, and it cost me $15 a month for a room for her. And I only had $16 left to feed her. Pretty hard to do for a month, so I used to play poker, penny ante stuff. And I was lucky enough that I could help support my wife. And then in the Army, we were in Oregon. And of course, then it was just a matter of going from one thing to another. I went from a private first class to a corporal and then a sergeant and a staff sergeant, and that's when I was shipped out overseas as a staff sergeant. And I changed my position, done several things, did training. One of them was I filled in for the operations sergeant at the battalion for a week while he was on leave, and it went on my record. As it turned out, when I was halfway through the war in Italy, they needed an operations sergeant, and the old colonel says, "Well, what am I going to do?" And he got the roster out, and then he went down and he said, "Well, who is this Sergeant Riebe I see here?" And that was me, and I went right into operations sergeant. And in operations in a regiment, you're probably one of the few people that really know what's going on, because you have a map. It's about 3 feet square, and it has a vinyl cover, and you put marks all over it. But you know where the enemy is, and where your troops are, where your communication lines, and all this. And anytime the general come by, he'd want to look at that map. Well, he was so impressed by the operations sergeant we had before me that he promoted him right on the spot. That's when they put the colonel in the spot to replace him. And so I ended up doing that, and it was a good job. And my first 30 days in combat, I was done the job of an assistant communication officer, which was a warrant officer, junior grade. And I went to the examination, and I went before the board of generals. And if you don't think that's a little kind of scary in a way, you go up, you got about 6 or 8 high-ranking officers sitting around there in the room asking you questions, and you're standing up there at attention. Well, anyway, I passed that examination. And when the war was over, they offered me the warrant officer's appointment, but I had a string on it. I'd have to stay in another year. And I decided that I didn't want to. So my whole life might have been different. My boys would have been Army brats, and I'd have stayed active if I'd have got in. But that, basically, that's on the ranch. Of course, my brother and I, we were cowboys. And right now, I like to tell people I'm one of the last of the cowboys that worked cattle with a horse and a rope. Now they 4-wheel drive things and just holler, I guess, I don't know. Or squeeze chutes and that, but we'd have to rope them and drag them up to the fire, and wrestle them and brand and castrate and vaccinate. The history of vaccination in those days. People look at, we had the vaccine, and we'd cut little strips of cotton about 1 inch wide and about 6 inches long. And we cut a little slot in the dewlap on the critter's neck. That was the dewlap, that's the fleshy part. Just cut it out and then tie that in there, and that was your vaccination. Primitive, but it worked. So that's a little history of the cowboy. We broke horses. My brother was an excellent man. He was 6 years older than I was, and he'd help me get on the horse, and then I'd ride him until they quit bucking, and then but I wasn't afraid to ride anything because he was there to help me. And of course, when you're about 18, 19 years old, you're invincible. You know, you could do anything. You know, I'm lucky. I got thrown a lot of times, but I never broke any bones. God help me if I had. Then in those days, I'd have been out of luck. No insurance. Insurance was something you never heard of even.
So last time we talked, you told me a story about a shell going through an Italian house.
Oh.
That was a pretty interesting one. I'd like to get that one on camera as well.
Well, we were in an Italian village, of course, and there we would go into combat. You'd be committed for 30 days. And I was, at that time, I was just kind of a loose end sergeant in the company. And we were having breakfast, and down in the bottom floor of this old Italian stone building, and the walls were about 2 feet thick or so, and all stone. The upstairs window was about 2 feet square, no glass in it, and the upstairs floor in those, and they would put down some light material and then put about 3 inches of plastic over it and make a floor so they could support it. Well, building this up so you get some idea of what the house was like. When we were down the first floor, and in the corner, the kitchen was set up out away from the corner, and then some of us sergeants would kind of ranked our way back of the serving, so we could squat back at the wall there. Well, to make a long story short, the Germans had an artillery gun mounted on a railroad car, and they'd pull it out of the tunnel and shoot it, and then pull it back in the tunnel so you couldn't find it or couldn't shell it. Well, one of those shells, and their shell was about 20 inches in diameter at least, and about 4 feet long. One of those shells came in that upstairs window. Now, had it hit the wall, it would knock the house down. But it came in that window, went through the upstairs floor, and it wasn't hard enough to detonate it, and it didn't hit at the right point. But it landed in the corner of the room that we were having breakfast in, right behind the first sergeant. He was about 6 feet from it, and it exploded. Now, had this been a good round, it would have blown us all out. But it blew into 4 pieces, and we found some bad powder laying in it afterwards after we examined it. And so it was a dud, or it went bad in laying around in storage somewhere. But then, of course, first sergeant, he got his leg broken. He was the only major casualty in that room, except me. He said, "Riebe, you're the first sergeant. Get the company and get going with it." Well, while they were firing this big gun at us, they hit our motor pool with some tank guns. It's 88 German weapon, and it was a hot weapon thing to receive. You never heard the one that got you, so it's faster than sound. Well, they hit our motor pool, we killed the motor sergeant, wounded 4 or 5 drivers, and knocked a lot of vehicles out. Well, of course, the company I was in was a headquarters company, and the order was to get the company ready to move out in 3 hours. And we didn't have a motor pool, we didn't have a motor sergeant, and they just lost a sergeant, so they had me as the first sergeant. Fortunately, I remembered back in the communications platoon on the switchboard was a fellow that had been a motor sergeant in the States, and had been a good one too. But he'd come in a little late from leave or something, such a thing, like some frivolous thing, and they going to teach him a lesson, you know, they busted him out of his rank. Well, that's the way they did things. But anyway, I knew he was back there, so I just called back, said, "Come on up, you're the operator, you're going to be the motor sergeant here, and we're going to get this outfit going." And so him and I got together, we got the company roster out and started going over it, and finally we rounded up enough fellows to drive and enough vehicles to get the company moving. And I think this probably had, I don't know, all the stuff I did might have had something to do with the medals they give me. But I never did know for sure. They had a nice, colorful citation written up, and I know I'd done a lot of things that I was always there. When they wanted something done, Sergeant Riebe was always there. I'd done everything. After I hit to North Africa, I never did my job again that I was sent over there to do. I did somebody else's. So it's kind of an interesting thing. There's one other thing. While I was kind of loose sergeant in the company, I was in charge of a signal supply depot. And they put you a little bit back of the lines, you know. But there's a side of the mountain that I suppose is a whole acre or two. And it's just, the Germans had zeroed it in when they left, so that if any parked on it, they could fire on it and do some damage. Well, one side of it was straight down, and then back and then around the edges, an old irrigation ditch. Well, I was in there, and they dug foxholes along the strip of that, so that it had to be a direct hit to get them. See, if somebody go on down the mountain, or if they missed on the inside, they'd be okay. Well, all of the troops that were assigned to that defense of that position, they had their foxholes. Well, I was my office, and I had a telephone and my other equipment. I set up on the side of this old canal, an irrigation ditch. Well, they needless to say, they had us zeroed in with these 88 hot machines, and they fired a barrage on us. And I never heard the first one, but I know when I come to realize what I was doing, I was trying to dig myself deeper into this irrigation ditch. And when the firing stopped, I got up, and there was a piece of this 88 shrapnel about half the size of your hand embedded in the telephone that had been right at my side. So somebody was looking after me. Anyway, I got through, I gave the museum in Polson, Montana, the America Museum, I gave them that piece of shrapnel so they'd have some. I give them some other stuff from the military I had too. There's mementos. They're a good bunch of people, and they're preserving a lot of history. And then I went on, and through the war, it was, well, several occasions. We had what they called a fluid front. When we broke in, we spent the whole winter, the last winter, in the Apennine Mountains, which is about like it is around here for climate. If you follow the world map around, you'll see that they were just about the same. Well, anyway, we were kind of anxious to get out of there, and when we finally broke into the Po Valley, was a nice. That's where the Germans were fighting us. In fact, just for you, and I just only thing I want you to do is be sure you get them back to me.
Oh, yeah.
I'll let you get the history. You'll find it's quite interesting.
Thank you very much.
But anyway, we broke into out there in the fluid front gully that we were advancing as fast as we could. And at night, you know, the blacked out convoys down through the vineyards, and you could hear vehicles next to us about a quarter of a mile going the same direction, but they were Germans and we were Americans. They were trying rushing to the river so they'd get across the river ahead of us, and then damage any bridges that might be standing yet. But that was really quite an interesting thing. But the next day, we were working down, and the Major and I were actually made up most of my operations for field operation, and then we had a Jeep driver. And we were going down a road just by ourselves, and I come around the corner, and here we met it must have been about a battalion of Germans, all in their dress uniforms, fully armed, walking in a parade, six abreast coming up the highway. And they were going to want to, they were out to surrender is what they wanted to do. Well, so they sent a runner up to us, and you know, you hear all these Germans, and here's just the three of us in this Jeep. And they sent a runner up, and we talked to him. They had a German colonel, and he wanted to give up, he wanted to surrender. But my officer was only a major. You know, so we said, well, you just keep on going up the road here, and there'll be the colonel's back here. And so they gave a command, and they opened the rank, and we drove right through. It's kind of interesting. Under the circumstances, it made the hair kind of stand up on the back of your neck, because you didn't know when you first saw him what the heck was going on. You know. But it was weird situations like that in that fluid front. Everything was always on the south side of the Po River. Abandoned German vehicles all shot up by our Air Force. It was just a big bunch of junk, all miles and miles of it.
Big scrap pile?
Scrap pile, yeah. But I don't know, I was very fortunate. And it's just like one of the fellow's comments in the book I just have you to read there, is that he said, I made it. He just sat down and said, thank God I made it, he said. And that's the way most of us felt. I don't know. In the fall, I just couldn't stand inactivity, so started going to work, and hell, I signed into the GI plan to be a mechanic on that January, and
So maybe you can go through and show us what all these medals mean that you got here.
Well, this is the Legion of Merit. This is a Cross of Valor, Italian, and this is a Bronze Star, ours. Then we have a Victory Medal and a Good Conduct Medal, and then these are my shooting medals. Expert rifle, carbine, and pistol at 45. And these are the major This one up here, combat infantry, you'll notice it's on the top of all of them. If you see any of these high-ranking military officers, they're always on the top of their list. It's the most coveted one the infantry has to offer. It's like the paratroopers and bragging about being paratroopers.
Getting their wings and stuff.
It has a meaning, definitely. And of course, this is a Mediterranean theater with 3 stars, 3 major combats, and this one here.
So could you go through and tell us what those ones were, all 3 of them? Could you go through and tell me what all 3 of those were, like the names for them were?
Yeah, well, this is a Legion of Merit.
The stars.
Huh?
The stars. Like what the 3 campaigns were?
Oh, the 3 campaigns?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd have to read them out of the book.
Have to read them out of the book, didn't yeah.
The last one, of course, we went into the Po Valley and ended the war. And the Gothic line was one of them. That was a major defense line the Germans had north of Rome. And it was 3 of them, and for the life of me, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
But it's in my book. I'll let you read the book.
Thank you. So, the battle cry of the 91st, what was...
Oh, it's a Powder River Letter Buck. That was, you see, when the 91st Division was a Western Division in World War I. And it was pretty much so coming out in World War II. I have to make a comment here. Most of the non-commissioned officer in my outfit were from the mountain states, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, or so. People that have to fare for themselves more than the big cities didn't produce as many non-coms. You know, I mean, I'm not an insult to you. They just were not exposed to that kind of a life. And to shoot, I felt sorry for some of those fellas. Never saw a rifle in their life and put them out there to learn to shoot. And it was so natural for me to shoot. I could just...
So your divisional patch right there on your
Oh,
shoulder.
this is the 91st Infantry Division.
The pine tree.
And pine tree, or fir tree, or whatever. It's a tree, green tree anyway.
Green tree.
And of course, this is Master Sergeant stripes, and this particular one was for an operations sergeant. I had them all at one time or another. I never missed one, but that's doing it the hard way. Like the fellow said, he earned it. Well, I guess I did too. But I nothing to be ashamed of, and I don't mean to be sitting out here bragging about anything. I just done the job as it came to me. I was one of the lucky ones that I got through it in real good health, and I could have been wiped out a number of times. One of the thrills I got was inspecting gun positions in the middle of the night out and wearing snow camouflage and hiking out there, just 2 fellas by yourself, walking across several miles of front to inspect these gun positions. A little thrill to it. And one time I was riding in one of the ducks. You know, that's a motorized, well, like a boat. You could use them both ways. Anyway, I was riding in that, crossing the stream at night. We were going to go meet with some partisans, the colonel, our major, and I. And I heard this zip, 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 and I looked down right alongside the boat with all these bullets. Germans were firing at me from the side, but I just got far close away. I was hearing the side of the boat here, and they were just hitting the water alongside of it. And it was, of course, dark. They didn't know they didn't know what they were shooting. They were just shooting. Harassing fire is what they called it. But we met with the partisans that night. That's one of those you see them in the movies where they go careening down through on a jeep, you know, and all this. Well, it was pretty close. We met them at the offer after we crossed that canal. We met up with these partisans, and they had a jeep, and we got in that thing and went roaring across the countryside. Then in the back doors and upstairs and around I couldn't tell you how we got there. Met with these partisans, and the major and I, and of course they were getting ideas and plans back and forth, exchanging plans, and they were going to help us get across the canal and keep the advance going. And it's just one of those things but when you look back, it just don't seem real. It's just happened to somebody else.
So you guys fought in close proximity with the Italian army.
Well, the Italians, after they were defeated, there was about a regiment of it that joined us to fight the Germans. And they were on our right flank. That's winter. How we happened to bog down for the winter, they were on our right flank. And the British was on our left. And I'll just say that the British didn't fight in a long war. I have to admit that. But at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you don't stop for tea. But they did. That's a fact, people. You're going to counteract me maybe and say I'm foolish, but they would stop at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for tea. Well, when they stopped for tea and we stopped, and the colonel got to looking at our position, and we were about 2 miles ahead of them on our left flank, and about the same as the Italians on our right flank. And we were stuck out there, and so we just stopped. The general come roaring down, what happened? And the colonel showed him, and that's where we spent the winter. In Livorno is what we used to call it Livornians, but Livorno was the name of the little hamlet that we spent our headquarters, forward echelon with. That's where we spent the winter there. It was unusual. Of course, you have to understand that the war we were fighting was a holding action by the Germans. And we were keeping that many German troops occupied so they couldn't do any damage over in Europe. And that was probably the best thing we did. Some of the top German troops were in Italy too, some of their elite units. Well, they could be nasty. I'll say this for the Germans, they were a well-disciplined army, but that didn't make it right.
So what German units, were they the paratroopers that you guys...
Oh, we had the German shock troops from some over on the west side of Italy and above Pisa in that area. But they had just a regular German army. But they couldn't supply it. We had the Air Force, we had air superiority at the last month or so over there. And they didn't dare move. And we had a cannon company. They'd 104 howitzers, and they were good. They'd see one German running out to expose himself out there, and they'd fire at him. They were that good. But they had to curtail us on that. They made us stop doing that because they wanted us to save that ammunition for the big push. And they were supplying the one in Germany so much that they needed all the supplies they could get to keep up with that. So they kind of limited us to what we could do, but it didn't make it any easier. I don't know what else to tell you. It was a cold, miserable winters, hot, miserable summers. The mountains were always, they were always up there, and we were down here. We had pack trains, and they were good. And our medics, you couldn't say enough nice things about them. They're a great bunch. Great bunch.
So after the war, what'd you do?
Oh, after the war, we were just in occupation up there around northern Italy, and that was kind of nice. I was just about 2 hours out of Trieste. I never went. I didn't want to go. I had no over out the canals, the city. I didn't want to go see them. I went over there afterwards. My wife and I went, and her brother, and sister-in-law, we went over and toured Italy after the war here. Well, it's 20 years after the war. Didn't look the same. The trees had all grown back up. Places that you could look out across, and you couldn't even see the hill now. But it was, it's surprising. The ground and Mother Nature has a way of recuperating of it, no matter how serious a mess they may make out of it. She has a way of coming back.
So, when were you discharged from the Army?
When was I discharged? Well, let's see. It was about 45, I think. Yeah. Fall of 45, I think it was. That's,
Oh,
well, I like to tell people this. I come home and we had they had a 52-20 club. You got $20 for 52 weeks. That's what, then you were supposed to be adjusted back into the speed of things, be able to take care of yourself. Well, fortunately I was. It didn't take me that long. I come home and in the fall that I just couldn't stand inactivity, so I went to be a mechanic on that January, and I served as apprenticeship mechanic, and I worked supported my family with it. But I think it gets me now. I can't understand this young generation. I was 24 years old. I had 2 sons. I had fought a war, and I had a mortgage on a house, and a steady job. And I knew what I was here for. And you talk to some of these young people nowadays, you wonder, you know, where was the mistake made? Was the parents, were we too lenient in my generation? Probably. I don't know. You're a compliment to the rest of you.
thank you very much, sir.
It's, in fact, I feel very confident sitting and visiting with you because I know I can tell where it's going and what's coming from. So, but I sit and talk a lot.
So in closing, what would be one major piece of advice you'd have for the youth of today? You know, what can we do to live up to your generation?
Well, the youth of today, I think they should be more conscious of what's happening in the world. Most of them don't have the slightest idea what's going on in the world. And our government, sad to say, but we have nothing in this United States to ever be ashamed of, and we don't have to apologize for anything. We made a few mistakes, true enough, but we have corrected and over-corrected anything that we've ever done. The big blot on our nation was slavery. But stop and think about it, people. Those people that we had for slaves were sold by their compadres over there in Africa. The other tribes sold them off to us for slaves. Well, when we just, right now, the thing that upsets me, everybody has a chance. I don't care who you are. You get a chance to get ahead in this country of ours. But you have to get up and do it. You can't expect the other guy to do it for you. And of course, never lose your sense of humor. That's one of my trademarks. And I find that, and always look up, and never look back, and never look back. You can't do anything about the past. I couldn't change anything in my past. Sometimes maybe I think I would have liked to, but then I didn't, and I can't do it now, so I'm not going to worry about it. And because I'm one of these people, I've been married twice. The first time was 32 years. Got 3 wonderful sons and great families. And my first wife is still alive. She is. She's 93. My boys are helping her along. And I remarried, and I was 38 years, second wife. And she had a big family, and the nice thing about it, her family and my family all like each other. It's great. And we get together and enjoy the company. So I say I'm the luckiest SOB here. And or one of the richest ones. I don't have a lot of them. I have like I say, I can have just enough to get by. I can get what I need, not necessarily everything I'd like to have, but I can, well, look at my apartment. Pretty nice apartment. And, of course, I got 2 sons, retired and living in Missoula. I got a granddaughter who's 25, works for the Missoulian. And we raised her, my wife and I raised her from 10 months old, so she's more like a daughter. And then I got my youngest stepdaughter. Her and her husband live here in Missoula. He works for Denny Washington. And she works for the Boone and Crockett. You know what that is? Where they keep track of this, all the size of these trophies and that, the Boone and Crockett Club. And she works for them. She was with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation for years, but then they had to downsize, you know. So, but the Boone and Crockett picked her up that quick because she's real good at raising money for the organization. Some have a knack and some don't. So I went as a mechanic, then I went into management. Then I went to Polson, and I was a franchise dealer for 3 different franchises in the car business in Polson. I had AMC, Jeep, and International. And then I sold out that, and then I worked around. And I spent 40 years in the car business. It's kind of a long time. But I always kept it. The only time I was out of a job was when I sold my business. And there was about 2 or 3 days there I didn't have a job. So I went down to another dealer and went to work for him. So that's the thing about young people. You've got to get out and just create your own thing. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. If you see an opportunity, or even the slightest chance of getting into something good, take a shot at it anyway. I think you'll do all right.
Thank you.
Well, God for that. So I guess that's about all I got to say.